All right, so with our lovely little Miss W, I wanted to see if we could work a little bit potentially with some puppy push-ups. I know that you guys had mentioned that at times she's a bit mouthy. Obviously, with this age group, mouthy behaviors is very, very common. Remember that when puppies are very mouthy, obviously they're going through some teething phases. Here we go, we'll plop a couple little snacks in her little toy. So as your puppy's losing their puppy teeth, of course, then as their adult teeth are coming in, it's uncomfortable. It can feel, of course, painful. And at times, puppies are also not getting enough rest. So puppies require between 18 to 20 hours of sleep a day. So I do find that a lot of my puppy students are actually not getting enough rest throughout their day. Also, if your puppy almost needed almost close to, again, 18 to 20 hours, that means they're really only awake and with you for like 4 to 6 hours. So I'm not saying this means that your puppy should be locked away and in a completely different room away from the family. But remember that just like with littles, if they're not getting enough rest, their developmental stages may not go as well. This does not mean that we're going to do the cry it out method. So for even for people, sorry, my little one sometimes is talking and I never know if she's asking me a question. So when it comes to small puppies, we want to make sure that they're getting enough rest throughout the day. So for a little one like her, I'm just going to readjust. Of course, getting cozy on the floor is really comfortable. I should have probably grabbed a chair, but next time. So with my little lady, what I'm also doing is the importance of kind of just being in a space and just also enjoying some nice chews is a great way to also take in the environment and start to feel more comfortable. So just like in all my classes, I always recommend my students bring chew items and lick items. And the reason behind that is chewing and licking is very soothing to puppies, but also to adult dogs, and of course teenagers as well when it comes to teenage dogs. Because the gnawing and licking is a great way to release some boredom or frustration, and also it helps with those teething moments. But the other thing too is that for a lot of dogs, as they're licking and gnawing, it releases serotonin and dopamine. So as your puppy's getting more comfortable, they are actually raising their happy feelings within their brain, even if, let's say, something was a bit overwhelming or a little bit flustering in the beginning. So I'm sometimes just plopping a little crumb of a snack at the edge of some of her chew items because I want her to be able to go and chew and work on something while she's hanging out with us. So if, let's say, for example, our little lady is especially mouthy and very jumpy, a lot of times behavior is exaggerated as your puppy's getting tired. So if she's not getting enough downtime because she's always wondering, where are you? Who's coming in and out of the house? What was that noise? If she's the solo dog, of course, you don't have other sibling dogs to get her distracted. But at times, they're still not getting a good rest chunk of sleep and sort of downtime throughout the day. I do normally highly recommend puppy-proof a zone of your home. So maybe there's the kitchen, maybe there's a section of the living room. If your puppy is doing behavior that you're not a huge fan of and they're able to rehearse it, that means they're actually getting good at that behavior. So I know you had mentioned that at times she hops up on the furniture and you're not a huge fan of hopping up on furniture. So this might be where if she's in the living room or an environment that has furniture available, maybe she goes into the space and instead she works on going to her mat and practicing a bit with some of her special chews, and you build up value in targeting her spot. There are several videos on how to work target training. I'll be sending resources, obviously, to a lot of the newer Doggy Day School students because this is their first day coming. So we want to make sure they're set up for success. So for our little lady, Miss W, if she's again giving you a hard time, she's having a hard time. So remember to give her the benefit of the doubt and show her what you'd rather. If, for example, she's constantly failing, it could be that the setup or the environment is past her ability or comfort range. She's going to go get a little drink of water maybe. She's like, nope, just kidding. So if, again, she's doing something you're not a huge fan of, always think, what would I prefer my lovely lady to do instead? And how can I do that and help her out? There are going to be plenty of times where you don't feel like working on something, and that's okay. But that's where setting up your puppy in the puppy-proof zone will be immensely helpful. So I would recommend management is your number one step for success, and then prevention as well as practicing the things you'd rather have her get good at. So obviously having some of these chew items are a great way to build what to do instead of gnawing on the right versus the wrong item. And then that way that can start to become the habit into teenagehood and into adulthood. But if your puppy is constantly swiping shoes or grabbing for tissues or chasing the cat, and they're working that for weeks to months, it might be a lot of trying to backtrack to change up those responses to certain stimulus. So remember, right now you're trying to build up the adult dog you'd like for later by rehearsing the things you want them to get good at now into that adulthood. She's doing a great job with this lick. So what I might try with my little lady is, I'm not sure if she's worked it in the past, but I know for some puppies, working a little bit with some puppy push-ups are another great option. So I sometimes like to do this on a target mat because it's a little softer and more comfortable than the rubber floors. Right here, we have some noises from next door. So I might go yes and feed her for doing a little check-in. What I like to do though for puppy push-ups is, if your puppy's a little bit uncertain, I like to just kind of hold the food in its place and right there, yes and feed. So even though I know her little back end is facing you, I'll maybe see if I can turn her a little bit sideways so you can see her a little bit better. I'll move her little creature. So I like to have the food in my hand. So remember, we're going to create behavior through, in the beginning, especially luring, capturing, and shaping. So right now she says, lady, hand it over, I'm starving. So right there, yes and feed. So notice how I haven't said sit over and over as she hasn't maybe rocked it or she felt a little bit uncomfortable or she's hearing the weird noises from the environment. So if you're constantly saying something but your puppy's unable to perform it because either one, they don't get it, or they're environmentally overwhelmed, then you're losing out on the word or the meaning behind the cue. So I like to typically not say a thing until my puppy starts to get into the groove physically of going to the position. So let's say, for example, she's a little distracted by the noises again. I might simply go yes and feed as she's noticing the novelty in the environment. Because remember, when it comes to training, it's not just simply training for your basic skills, but it's also being able to build up comfort range and feelings of feeling safe while also boosting confidence. So again, I might try again, lowering the food up and above her little head right there. Yes, and feed for that gorgeous little sitting position. If she has never done a down position, don't worry if she doesn't grasp it her very first time when you're practicing. Sometimes for the shorter friends right here, we're going to feed her for that lovely sitting position first so we don't get her overwhelmed. So if let's say your puppy is not even getting a snack or anything for the attempt of doing something new, then why try even harder if the basic, attempt gave her nothing? So right here, if I'm trying to get her into that little down position, I tend to also feed for this attempt. So notice how she's kind of crouching slightly down. I'm going to feed her. My little one sneezed and it startled her. But I would feed her for the attempts. So typically for a down behavior, I tend to take the puppy, get their attention on my snack, and then from there, try to go from their attention on the food into getting their little bums on the floor first. And then from there, try to lower the front end and see if we can get a little bit of a lowering position. So even if it's sometimes just a little elbow, a little bend to the tummy or the front end, we want to still feed for the attempts, because then eventually we're shaping to that full behavior, which could be that down. If again, she does these things at home, that's wonderful. You can see that she's a little bit unsure because she heard these funny noises. If your puppy's ever feeling nervous, again, you can always take a break from what you're working on to try to help boost that comfort again. So a lot of times I find those find its are a much better option because it gets your puppy up and wiggling versus being stationary. So if she ever does feel a little apprehensive about something, always when in doubt, think movement behaviors are typically better. So, but if let's say we were getting some really nice sits, you can also go from the sitting position. And you typically would be marking this, like let's say, for example, we get her attention, we get her into a sit, we'd go yes and feed. And then that way, when she goes into a sit, she knows that's the reason she got it. It's right here, yes, and we feed. If you find she's very fast from going one position to the other, I do like to have several snacks in my hand, get the behavior I was hoping, and then work the second one, which could be a stand or up, which is to get up onto all 4 feet. But I'll be sending you guys written materials as well as visuals, as well as some diagrams. There she is. Ready? Find it. So that way, when practicing with Miss W, you guys will have many different items to resource or use as resources. So again, with this jumping, I would just turn, pivot, let her slide off, and then see if I can again feed for all 4 feet on the ground. So don't worry if training is not always exactly what you were thinking. The main goal is that you're fluid with your practice and that your puppy is able to sometimes bounce back and do maybe a simpler skill and go to there. So right here, we're going back to some of those lovely find its as some of the noises are coming back on in the building. So the heat's coming back on. And then we might go, Winnie, yes, and feed for that lovely response. So we'll give Miss W a little breather. I think she did a really great job with some of her first little skills. Remember though, the very first day is always tends to be the hardest for anybody trying something new. Ready? Find